I just caught that.
I went to like the fucking Goodwill, and I hate going to thrift stores. And I was like, I'm gonna buy a dumb shirt, but you know that for like $3. She's like, oh my gosh, it's not that big a deal. And I saw a Sandals shirt, I was like, perfect. I don't even know if Sandals still exists.
Feeling hot, hot, hot. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Bev Boys. We are the one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance conversations. I'm Brian,
I'm Christian.
and today we have a legend with us, at least a legend in the making, Terrence Kennell. TK, how you doing, man?
Oh man, I'm good. Fucking, I said it before. Like instead of having coffee today, and of coming with 2 energy drinks, I feel like I was fitting the bill perfectly.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
let's show everybody what we got. Is that
This is the Red Bull Spring Edition.
the grapefruit and like?
Yeah, grapefruit and blossom.
Ooh.
Okay.
Purely for taste only, because it's only like 60 milligrams of caffeine. Yes, and then the other one is the green apple cherry Celsius that tastes average as grits, but has
We
2
reviewed
milligrams of
that.
caffeine.
Yeah, I was not a big fan.
I think we gave it like a 6.1.
I feel like that's about right. That's about right.
Yeah. I went with a Celsius today too. I feel like we've been like hitting on some banger drinks lately. So I was like, let's do something that's probably pretty gross. So I spent way too much money on a 12-ounce can and got the strawberry passion fruit Celsius. $3.49.
Holy shit.
They're taxing for these things. But strawberry passion fruit, good pop. I'll say that. It smells like an old locker room.
It's not a good sign.
No, it's a bad start.
It kind of tastes like rotten fruit. Like I don't know if it's the passion fruit, but it tastes like a rotten strawberry.
Well, there's $3.50 down the drain.
There's 50. Yeah. Thank God I have my raspberry mocha Wandering Bear cold brew.
I just got myself a coffee made by my roommate. Some Dominican coffee with a little bit of cinnamon in there. Pretty good. Turn it into Brian slowly.
We can run it back on the Lost episode.
Oh my gosh, dude. We cannot be having. Oh.
We haven't. Yeah, you can go ahead and tell the story.
It was the last time we recorded before I left, and he's like, "Dude, you got to try a Zin one time. Like you told me you'd do it one time before you left." I'm like, "All right, man of my word, let's do this." Dude hands me a 6. I've never done this shit in my life. It was like, all right, like, oh my god. I was like, for the first 5 minutes, it was like, okay, like I definitely feel something, and then that quickly turned into lightheadedness, and then I threw up. Actually threw up. So
on camera, like
on camera,
directly in front of the camera, running out of the room, like throws up in his hand, spills on the floor.
Dude, that was But I tried it, so I probably lasted less than 10 minutes. Pause.
That was like the last episode we recorded in that house too.
Yes. Legendary.
Yeah. So TK, for anyone that doesn't know you, which I feel like is honestly pretty hard now to not know who you are. Like I think you've done a great job at like making a name for yourself in the space and like making yourself visible to a lot of people and like spreading information. Give everyone a 5-minute elevator pitch on who you are, what you've done.
Okay, cool. So yeah, TK, strength conditioning coach here at University of South Florida. Strength conditioning coach / like director of applied football science, whatever title. I've always joked I've had more sports than t-shirts. So I've like worked in UFC, worked in professional rugby for a few years. I spent some time in Japan and over in the UK in London, and then worked in basketball. Worked in professional women's soccer. Worked at Astros for a couple years, so I've bounced around with tons of experiences for better or worse at times, depending on who you ask. Like, but I would say with that, it's maybe like very much I'm going with like a almost open-minded, like very like I'm not married to any one hard thing, and that's just because I've been lucky enough to have some different experiences from a training S&C side. So there's very little like dogma into how I like try to think. I guess I don't know. I think that's probably like a shit version of fucking doing it. If I know that bitch, but
You were with the Astros when they won the World Series, correct?
no. So I was between. We went to the World Series against the Nationals my first year, lost in Game 7, and then our second year we lost in the ALCS, and I left in the middle of my third year.
Still some success.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I fucking got rings out of it.
Yeah, guy like says like, "Oh no, we lost," and then goes on to say, "We were in the World Series, we were in the ACLS," like, and then Tokyo. What were you doing? What were you doing in Tokyo?
So working for Kier when I'm flat, the infamous, depending on who you ask, and then also like rugby strength coach or like call me Kier now on Instagram. So I was working for him in Japan, professional rugby there. There's I was going to like coach a few different All Blacks, coach a few like Japan national team players. Guys just coming off the World Cup where they had beat South Africa. Coach guys who played for South Africa as well. Coach guys who played for Australia. So that was a fucking really cool experience there. From my coaching side, I was probably like a huge, which I think at the time you don't realize it, but yeah, it played a huge role in my development as a coach because it forced me to have to coach the guys who like English was their second or third language. So like you learn to say as little as possible, and also you become really good at demoing. You become good at demoing, and you also be able to realize that like, hey, you can only say what's absolutely most important, and then kind of shut the hell up and get out of the way.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going through that right now, working with a lot of like Latin guys, and it's like, okay, you got to really distill down to the basics because if you get too complicated, like you're gonna lose them.
Oh yeah.
On top, yeah. What made you decide to want to go like in the international space? Like, is that something you kind of planned on? We're like, oh, I kind of want to see what's out there, or just kind of fall into your lap and
So for that one was like at the time, I was pretty sure I wanted to like work in professional rugby. I think we lost Brian. And
yeah,
so
he'll come back. Don't worry
yeah,
about
so
it.
I knew like my chance of doing it in the U.S. was slim to like none essentially, and I'd already been following like Kier back from like 2015. I was like I was a probably an early member of his site too, and he was almost like rugby strength coach like community, and so because of that, I saw the opportunity come. I literally started a internship in North Dakota State. I was been there for like 4 or 5 days, but I think right before I got there, I saw Kier post on Instagram looking for like probably a paid internship kind of role in Tokyo. And I was like, fuck it. Worst to say is no. Like I throw my hat in the ring. There's no shot I'm gonna get it. And people are way more qualified than me. Um, Applying for it. So I drove up to North Dakota, up to Fargo. Was there ready to start that. I think the internship was like football and basketball. It was like all sports. There was like 10 of us. And I'm there for like 2 days. Get an email from Kier about another task. I'm thinking like, oh shit, I actually even got a reply. Do like the secondary task for it. Do the interview, and then maybe like I'm in Florida maybe 4 or 5 days, 5 days maybe, and then get an email saying I got the position and like I basically need to get on a plane to Japan within it's like 72 hours. And so then I literally pack my stuff up, leave my rent on the counter for like my roommates for the rest of that summer that I was supposed to be there, and drove straight from Fargo, North Dakota, back to Jonesboro, Arkansas. I was going to Arkansas State at the time. To basically repack myself, grab my passport, get on a plane from Memphis like a day later, and flew to Tokyo.
Oh my god.
Damn, dude, that's crazy. Speaking of, you said you've worked with more sports than you have t-shirts. Is that something you kind of like planned on? You knew you wanted to work in a lot of different areas, or was it just kind of continued curiosity? How did that come about that you ended up working in all these different settings?
For me, it's probably more continued curiosity a little bit, along with like, I mean, being 100%, like 100% also the stack of like, I had a bit of an ego too of like, I felt like I got to a point where I was like, okay, I felt like to ask like, okay, I want to be like more in a position where I'm like in charge. Like basically more of a leadership, like head role. Like yeah, I was head of rehab, and I had like limitations. That was a great position, stuff like that. I learned a ton in that role. But it was always a level of like, I felt like I was ready to take my next step. Whether I was or not, there's only one the way I saw it was like, there's only one way I'm going to find out is if I take the jump. And so that's what let me work into soccer and then like basketball, then the UFC, and then back around the football. I started off in football at Arkansas State, but then I think there was a level too of you seek more money in a position like it was not paid well at all. At the Astros, like full be transparent about that shit, and then so I was like part of it also, and then there's a level too of like I was coming back from the UK, going back to the US. Like I've been in the UK for 2 years, 2.5 years. Did my master's there. Worked in a few worked in a rugby club there. Had a few like private like athletes as well. But because I didn't work in the U.S. anyway, I didn't have a bunch other than like from a small stint in Arkansas State. It wasn't under like a U.S. coaching tree. Like I could not get a fucking job to save my life, like at all. It was actually kind of wild. Like I still have like a folder on my Gmail, like all the rejection emails or whatever from like I think it ended up being like 130 jobs, like from private sector to college to pro of like just button no's. So it was like there was like that side of it. And then what got me to the Astros was that the boss, I had director of performance at the time, Dan Howells, was Kier's old boss. It was Kier's old boss, another mentor of mine, Tom Farrell, was his old boss as well in rugby. And so I had to do like a whole interview process. He was already over in the US. So I was in the UK and we're doing a crossover like interview process for that. And that's what got me to the Astros. Before that, I was like literally going back to US with a straight no job up until that. That was probably my last month of being there.
It's kind of such an odd thing that you kind of like in a way, like you've worked in like the pinnacle of something and you come back to like your own home country and no one gives a shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like you've worked at like top of rugby. You're working across like different hemispheres, not even just different countries, but you're at the top, and then you're like, hey, I just want to come back and coach. I don't really care. Like you even mentioned like private facilities, like getting rejection letters. Like it's just such like a closed, like kind of siloed off from the rest of the world of like, well, you didn't work in like sport in America, so that's great. Yeah. Good luck, have fun. We're not going to hire you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of times being like, man, so stuff wasn't under like the banner of like, oh, and this person's coaching tree, that person's coaching tree, or whatever. So it didn't fall under any of that like, realm. And I worked for two dudes in rugby that people in the U.S. didn't really know about. And that was like it. They were like, oh, cool. You worked at like New Zealand. Worked for like, you coached a couple All Blacks. Oh, I read the book Legacy. Sweet.
Yeah. Kier kind of had the same thing, like when he came into America, right? Like he was interning at like Richmond and then like kind of moved up his way, but it was like the similar thing, especially like after he had just saved up money when he was working in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Like
it's very weird, like silo I think we have in the U.S. of like I don't know where it really stems from. I don't know if it's like an arrogance thing we have or what. It's just like this, like, oh, this is our sport. This is like what we do is like different from what see over there. So it's really like most S&C what I found in like some of the various like big S&C countries like Australia's, England, US is like it's kind of S&C general thought process where a common S&C coach is guided by the most popular sport in that country. So like in the UK, like it's probably gonna offend people. UK tends to be not great when it comes to the strength power of things because the most popular sport is soccer. So like. But from a physiology standpoint, conditioning standpoint, like they're light years above what the fuck anybody tends to know in the U.S. Like U.S. we tend to be so behind the understanding of like basic human physiology. It's absolutely wild. The U.S. has a shot at Tony Holler and fucking feed the cats. Like it's ridiculous. And so like we get like that side of it versus in like same thing in Australia. Like, the biggest sport is Aussie rules football, which is a huge conditioning components, so understand the physiology is greater. A huge amount of like high speed sprint volume, along with like that you see in soccer, and also you add the rugby components like the strength and power side tends to be very good, but not to the same maybe nth degree if you have in the U.S. because in rugby you have the element of like you need to be able to sprint, you need to be able to change direction, you need to be able to maintain those qualities and that repeatability for across 80 minutes or 90 minutes in soccer. Or in cricketball is massive. So guys are doing like 30K in a week training because they're doing 12K in the game. And that's probably undershooting Aussie rules football because the field is absolutely massive. But So I think those things help guide a little bit of what people think occurs in those countries, so in those regions of the world from an SEC perspective versus the U.S. Like ours is American football, so to strength and power side, we tend to handle pretty well in general. Like there are some things are better than others. Some people Olympic lift, some don't. Whatever, like who cares? But like it tends to be the guiding factor of how we do things. But then when you ask like basic conditioning questions, people tend to like spiral. Tends to be very very lost in the weeds. Or even if you ask sometimes even like simple like basic speed stuff, people are like, oh, it's at self 15 yards. Your top speed at 20. It's like, do you use your top speed at 20? Like, do you actually know? You're just regurgitating because you heard one guy say this one time.
Yeah. Now there's a really good piece in there that I think we have to address because like you took the shot, right? There's a previous argument that you had, and it's based on like you're avid on the like the idea of like a good aerobic capacity or a base level foundation of aerobic fitness, that like robustness on the system is necessitated to support the more alactic side or like true speed stuff instead of just neglecting it and say only sprint, only sprint, only sprint, only sprint. Like kind of talk about that in the sense of like where that came from, why you see that being like such a supportive factor in order to be ready to have that. And do you see it being a different aspect of not only just supporting the like alactic movements such as like the speed power in that piece, but like also like preparations for the games where it's like if we only sprint and we only cover say 300 yards maybe tops in a session ever, do we have a system on the athlete that's probably ready to handle 60 minutes of a game that they're reaching a couple thousand contacts on the feet?
Yeah. So I'll start with. So I think from a Philly football side, like there's a level of base general physical like preparation or aerobic qualities that you need to not only sustain the ability to like produce like high outputs like within the sport on like a Saturday or a Friday, but then you work backwards to even like how you even prepare to get to those days from a campsite, spring ball, what have you, and like a level of okay, you need to be able to tolerate a certain amount of load to even be good at the sport to begin with. How do you handle like technical work with indie? How do you handle group work and teamwork with tactical side? So as a level of fitness you need to handle those not only within the day, but then also it's like, hey, you practice on a Tuesday, you also practice again on a Wednesday. You may have a walk through a practice on a Thursday, then another practice on a Friday, you play on a Saturday. So you have to be able to recover between those days as well, not just between like drills and day of. So it's like that thing of, yes, like an elite 23 mile per hour, like high speed receiver is great. But if you only do it one time, that doesn't serve you a whole lot of value in the actual game. Versus, hey, if he can top out 23, he can maintain and repeat in the 20s, like 19 and a half to 23, like from across 4 quarters on multiple routes, being a gunner on punt, what have you, run down kickoff. It's like that is significantly more valuable than like the one deep ball he can catch and then he's blowing out the rest of the game. And I think also there's a level of two. We get so caught up in we have to remember like football players, just within or any team sport athlete, really like they're like strength generalists, they're like sprint speed like generalists. So like they don't necessarily need the same true high intensity exposure all the time as like a track athlete or as a powerlifter or a bodybuilder, because in the day it's all just very general to them to get them prepared for their sport. And so I think people get stuck in this idea of like, I mean, you hear the thing of like, oh, train like a track athlete. And they always point Christian McCaffrey, but it's like he's gotten hurt like almost every year he's been in the league. So it's like there are some values. The general idea is like, yeah, you should train for speed. Speed's a super important quality. You should train to be reactive and elastic, but not at the expense of like these other qualities that underpin that help you to handle the demands of the game. And like, so I think that's where people get so lost in the weeds. Like, yeah, it sets you to sprint all the time. Like, it'd be great if you just sprint 3-4 times a week. We got nothing else, it'd be fucking awesome. It'd make everyone's day way easier. But the reality is, of like preparing for a sport, it just takes more than that. Like how much time you spend on your feet for like, if you're a lineman, luckily the way we've had first beat here, getting ready to go into our second year of having first beat. We had on some linemen all season, but we had on some receivers too and a few DBs. And seeing the actual demands of the game, especially for us, with a super high, like high pass, very high pace offense, Like I think we were number one in the country in like plays per game, or number three in the country in plays per game, and like one in the country in like plays per minute. Like we were averaging like 3 plays a minute or some shit like that. So it's like for our linemen, like this game is actually pretty glycolytic like, for them because it's literally fighting a 5 yard box. Hopefully you're still on your feet, and I move down the field, fighting a 5 yard box again, snap the ball, fighting a 5 yard box again. And for our receivers, a lot of times it becomes somewhat similar where we have instances within the game where like it's literally go ball, come back, you run another go ball because literally it's exhausted in the corner, and then you run a hook. We throw it to you. Now corners make a tackle, and then a fourth play you're going to go ball again because now he's tired, and so are you, but you're slightly less tired than he is, hopefully. Like, and that's where it's like ability of like yes, you want that very much top end speed to be there, but you have to have to train the qualities to the ability to repeat those efforts within some level of intensity over a 3 hour, 4 hour. For us, like we throw the ball sometimes like a 4 hour game because there's so many possessions.
And then like looking through that, like there's always an argument that everyone always has. Like I get it a lot with working with both sports. But everyone's like, could I beat your track athlete? In the football guys, they'll come over. Can I beat your track? You kind of have to just sit there and be like, it's different speed. Like you got, again, like you mentioned, like you're a strength generalist, you're a speed or like a sprint generalist. Like you do that in order to support. Like if I put them out there and try to cover you on a wide receiver, they're going to look like a 13-year-old kid trying to cover an NFL player because they don't do that. Whereas like your say 20 hours of practice is going towards route running, schematics, the tactical, all that aspect. Whereas like all that technical and tactical is applied to just minutia like changes in sprinting. It's just not comparable where everybody tries to like blend it so much and they're like, well, just train them like a track athlete. That's great, but now they also have to brace for contact or they have to make a cut at say 15 yards to run a dig route or an out route. Yeah. Like they have to be able to lower their center of mass versus just stay upright. Like they have to brace for contact. It's so different and it's repeated. Whereas like in track, I think your quickest turnaround probably for a sprinter, you're in a meet, you're probably having like an hour turnaround, maybe 45 minutes. Like that's a good rest time, even if it isn't all out bout. Like in football, it's, for some people it's like 20 seconds. You got to be able to get back in and have that like repeat sprint ability.
Yeah, we have one dude on our tier one receivers. He was on the track team his freshman year. He did both. He ran 10, I think it was 10.4, 10.5. We have a couple guys in high school that ran that, but he ran 10.4 and outdoor meet last year. He was I don't know what he ran his 60 in because he did indoor as well. He might have like a 6.7, like a high 6.7 guy. So like a fast, and like the fastest on our team football wise. And guys like, oh man, like I think I'm just as fast. So I'm right there. I'm like, yeah, you're close, but like here's the difference. He runs that, and the fastest guy on our track team runs a 9.9. like that, like that's the difference. Like yes, his fastest is like a team 10.4, and here I dude who was on a 9.9, I think 3 times. Like, do you know how big of a gap that actually is?
That's a long distance.
Florida,
yeah.
Florida, we're lucky. We have lots of guys who ran like mid 10s and 100 in high school and stuff like that. Some of the purchases being like down here, but guys in rows like man, there's like a whole different. There's like that. Like yes, that's great. 10.4, 10.5 in high school, fucking elite, like high school time. But then there's dudes who run 9.9.
Yeah,
or like 10.1, 10.2, and it's like
brother, there's levels of this shit.
Yeah.
So when you guys kind of looking at like a lineman where that is a little bit more glycolytic because it's so repeatable, like shortened recovery time. Yeah. Are you approaching training in the sense of like more like traditional repeat sprint ability, or are you more on like let's train the end ranges, let's get the tempo runs, the aerobic fitness that supports our high speed stuff where they can then have the capacity to walk back down on the speed reserve side and be able to repeat stuff in a game? Or are you training that in preparation for the game?
Tips to kind of train a little bit of all of it. Like, so we have a true like tempo day on like a Monday, a match velocity like high speed sprint day on a Tuesday. Shout out to you, got me to flip my days last year. So it was mad beneficial, by the way. So it's a match velocity work on a Tuesday. Wednesday is typically our recovery day. You may have like a walkthrough or something like that, depending on the time of year. And then Thursday will be the first part of like a block. Usually some like it's just low level aerobic work. Like we do a modified version of like the calories injury reduction run.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely miserable. The guys absolutely hate it. But it's super just low intensity aerobic work. That'll be the first like 3 weeks usually of a block, depending on how long we have. And then that day will eventually turn into more repeat spinability day. Where we do like essentially like Kier's version of like the tribe run. We like change it up a little bit, but similar work to rest ratios. And we'll bring the work down a little bit. It will bring the rest down as well, like down from like 30 seconds all the way down to like 15 seconds, to try to mimic the work ratios of our play, offensively and defensively in some cases. Um, and then that also changes for the linemen. So the linemen will do some level of that in the winter. They'll typically do as regular because like we're not as worried about spring ball. But then in the summer, that actually turns to basically like a repeat prowler. So it'd be like a heavy prowler, and it's like a 4 second mash with like 2 plates on each side, and then it's like a 15-second rest, and then I can repeat it. And so that becomes their version of that. Now we do O line and D line
Mm-hmm.
for that, and that's like even our ends as well. Now we have another like our edge rusher, our B backer guys, like they'll do both. So like 1 week they'll go off the prowler, the other week they'll go a true regular like on RSA day, and then we hit all our Excel stuff on a Friday, and then eventually once like we hit like our OTA kind of model we do here, like in the summer for our offensive guys, they'll hit those like those speeds and volumes and intensities that we want. They'll hit it with in routes on Tuesday and a Friday, and our defensive guys will still just keep what they do with us. So the defensive guys tend to be very awful hitting upright running, and it's just because they're never exposed to that in the game unless they're getting beat. Essentially,
Like, yeah, if we're in that, we're in a bad spot.
yeah. But basketball, like he's like he's down a pick six and he's housing.
Yeah. in that manner, like you've previously talked a couple of times, like on like minimum speed thresholds and things like that. Like where is your kind of like idea, saying like just miles per hour, of like what's your speed threshold that you want your guys to hit in terms of like say a high speed distance or a sprint distance, and how much volume are you kind of doing that? And then obviously in off season, super easy in terms, I'll say relatively easy. It's relatively easy because you're in complete control, right? Off season is off season. That's your guys' time with them. How do you make sure that they hit those distances and have that attained without, say, like overdoing it in like a practice setting in fall or even in spring ball? And like how does that kind of go with like the football coaches like themselves and the sport coaches to make sure that we're not overdoing it?
Yeah, so from a high speed distance standpoint, we worked roughly off like 65%. We tried 70, but I found with 70 with football, like you see 70 working like in rugby and stuff like that, but like, with more transition games, it's way easier. Like guys tolerate 70% plus like that's like their high speed distance threshold pretty well. But once you stop being like football, and because there's not as much running that occurs, like 70 is kind of breaks it off. So like we kind of drop it down to 65% as a like high speed distance percentage, so it's relative to everyone's on like high speed, everyone's like top velocity. And then for our skill guys, like their high day on a practice Tuesday, so everything which worked backwards from the game. So our high day from a Tuesday practice, we like it's about 600 yards of high speed distance in a day. And then our Wednesday practice, which is our medium day, essentially of the week, it's all like tight zone stuff typically, like third down, short yards. That's around 300, so that's a much like lower intensity day. Because we don't, so, like we have catapult, like we don't use play load at all because like I hate play load as a metric because it's too non-contextual. And then that's that. So high speed distance which covers like volume intensity metrics pretty much for the day, and we still look at total distance as well for like time on feet that we work backwards from and try to build that into and layer that into like our OTAs, and like we'll give like the coaches like, hey, this is my yards you kind of need to hit on this day. On Tuesday, this is how much you need to hit on Friday. Because end of the week we need to be around 18,000 for the week. So we know we're still within a track to hit 21K in the summer at some point, and then we know we're gonna pull back right before camp, down all the way down to like 13K in the last week before camp, and then we're going to camp and hit 20. First week of camp this year we hit like 20, like 19. Then go, and it was 20. Then we dropped it down to 16 and a half. Jumped up to 22 and a half, which is third, which is our biggest week of camp, and then we pulled it all the way back to 14K. on our week 4. And like I'm quite lucky where I think because our head coach is super objective, it makes the inmates like our jobs easier from an SEC standpoint. And like my boss Gio and like our head coach have a super close relationship, and so that kind of helps that trust very early on. So like that I can go to coaches like, hey, like can we pull back on this day? Can we pull back on this guy? Can we push more on this? Can we add another rack of plays in this team period? Can maybe take away this indie or stuff like that? And they're pretty like open to that because I mean I think maybe knock on wood like we see some like pretty positive results from it. And when Pearson we saw them as like it just has to wave.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to undulate in some way. We know like week 4 is like I know some people week 4 is like oh what's our biggest week of camp because of before the season, but like I kind of think the opposite way. I think week 4 should be like the easiest week of camp because now it gets real the following week, and because like people like the other stresses that are happening outside of the sport, like people are back on campus, like guys want to go out, dudes have been around each other for 3 weeks plus, like they want to go see some women, so they want to go they want to go out, dudes don't get haircuts and move into apartments, try and meet girls, like especially your freshmen, that's just what it is, like. We've all been 18 to 22 years old before. Like,
Yeah.
we get it. They might go out, whatever. And so we know, like, hey, that week 4, like, there's the most chaos going on, especially here, like, it's a campus of like 50,000 students, and like they've in our case like been in a hotel for 3 weeks. So like they've been in a hotel just around each other for 3.5 weeks. The last thing they want to do is like now have a hard root camp.
Yeah.
when now they're trying to move into their apartment, move into their house, there's all this other stuff going on. So then like we actually pull back that week 4 because we know games start the following week. And so our week 3 is always our biggest week. So we're like, hey, as long as it waves and it's not just monotonous volume, like every single week and every single day, like it kind of sets us up in a good spot from that end. And then our first true practice of the week, this is from camp all the way through the season and to like bowl games and stuff, is always like we call it like a high speed day. So you gotta hit 90% plus of the top speed. And ideally we always try to get it within football. So like running backs, receivers, tight ends, typically did that routes on air. Qs will get it in like an option drill where they keep it and go and say, hey, yeah, hit your 90. Like, and it's literally so much. So it's literally on the practice face at the top, like in like bold, like all caps, like 90% there. And the players all know. The players ask me if they hit it, they run it live. They ask if they hit it. They talk shit to each other. They run faster than other guys. We get it in kickoff and things like that. 7-on-7, half skill, pursuit. Doing what we get it in. So we always try to get it within football. And then if they don't, by the time about the middle of practice, then like our boss or our social director Frank or myself will grab the player, have me hit a rep, and then they're good with us.
So it's like an undulating kind of periodization in the aspect of like your high speed volumes to where not to like be the guy that relates it back to track, but it's almost like a little bit of a performance taper to the aspect of like.
Yeah,
we're gonna preserve some freshness for the shit that matters, and go into week 1 of a game where, whether people like it or not, your wins and losses do matter at big time football.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna make sure that you're ready for that. Versus like, oh, if we just like keep ramping up, like we'll outwork them.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, we take that same kind of undulation into the season. To like usually by week 3, 4, we pull back again. So even within the year, and we kind of do that a little bit based on the schedule of our opponent. Like we know for an example, last year is a great example because we started the season. It was like the Doom-Cookman FCS team. We thought, okay, we could kind of roll over so we could have a bigger week of practice. Because week 2, it got very real because we were going 2 touchdown boosts in week 2. so week 2, we're literally like we're playing at Bama. So we know we need a lighter week because like the stressors mentally, physically are gonna be through the fucking roof. So like we're really going to play Bama at 7:00 at nighttime kickoff and have 110,000 people on us. Like, and then we were in a dogfight for 3.5 quarters, which was great. But we were trash after that. like physically just exhausted. Like guys are beat up because like you played a number at that point. They're like number 2 in the country, 3 in the country team.
You basically played an NFL team.
Yeah. And then week 3, we played on the road again at Southern Miss, and so we crossed the time zones again. Luckily, we were able to kind of roll them and get some guys a little bit of rest here in the second half. But we knew like, hey, week 4 we're at home against Miami, who was at that time number like 7 or 8 in the country. So okay, now it'd be another dogfight with another like Power Four team that's potentially a playoff team as well. So they play Miami, and then just to end that 4 week stretch off real nice. We were on the road at Tulane the following week before we had a bye week. So we knew like, hey, like we'd be very smart in how we kind of structure the week because like, hey, we're going to be in some fights, and then we're going to be able to willing to pull back while still getting what we needed from like a tactical prep standpoint to be prepared for the game.
Yeah, so like your undulation, like you're looking at that season scheduling probably far out, looking at it and be like, where do we undulate? How do we plan this so we can kind of go up, go down as we go without being like, well, we'll just keep them fresh every week and we'll go super low volume. It's like, no, we have to go sometime, and we have to we got to push guys at limits a little bit to keep like the actual like physical capacities up. But how do we be smart about it to where we don't throw away a game against a number 2 team in the country, but we're not going to absolutely just ignore, say, a smaller school opponent, but we have an opportunity that we can like retouch those volumes and get those residuals done and be smart about it. So that way you can then undulate back down for a sick home game against an in-state school to see what we can do. I mean,
it was like definitely helped that like coaches are a bunch of planner too. So like we started like a conversation to plan out camp. We had the conversation in April, May, like in his office for a few hours. Our boss, him and I, and then we brought like coordinators too. And then same thing when we got the season schedule, a similar thing. We kind of already did it a little bit. Like all of camp's pretty much done along with spring ball. In terms of how we're gonna plan it, but like the same thing, like we just got a season schedule. Okay, we know what days we're playing certain people. Some are Thursdays, some are Friday games, Saturday games. I think our first 3 weeks this coming season is like Boise State here, and then it's Florida and Miami. That's our first 2 weeks of the season. It's like at Florida, at Miami, Boise State home. So we know like, hey, we have to play around with how we adjust practice and undulate things. Like, hey, our 2 bye weeks that we have are gonna be crucial. And like either times we need to pull back, or times like, hey guys, it's gonna feel kind of like crap, but it's gonna be better on the other end of it. Like we're gonna push it a little bit here.
That's
How much individual variation do you see with guys like being able to handle higher amounts of like high speed distance? Because like you touched on, if a guy can hit a 23, that's great, but if he can only do it once, he's not really worth much to you on the field. Do you see that as more of like just lack of the aerobic base, or like how do you address that to make guys more resilient to those higher volumes of like high speed running? And does that change anything field weight room wise for you guys?
A big one's changed for us, like like this past winter, it was like on the field side, like we kind of added some more like the Charlie Francis like double tempo work, and that like guys, it has been absolutely miserable for some dudes, but like it's being able to tolerate the level of like, hey, repeat high speed distance running instead of our traditional like normal tempo pace. Like, hey, like these need to be at like 80%. Right, same thing. We're always like running live. You guys know, like, hey, these double tempo reps, like maybe they only have 4 of them. But hey, rep 3 and 4 double tempo, and then rep like 9 and 10 to double tempo. So guys know, hey, you gotta run down 90 yards and you coming straight back, and he's pushing 75-80% the entire time. So I feel like that's been like a big added benefit for us on that end to help some of those guys who struggle a bit more to handle like those higher volumes. And most of the time, it's for guys, it's not like a volume issue as much as it is like the density part that you kind of struggle with. This is what I say, don't want the receivers having to like head tap after like 2 plays. You kind of want them to get about 5 6 before they need to come out, just for the sake of like the tempo and rhythm of like the offense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's an interesting aspect to where like a lot of people are going to get scared of like the double tempo because they're like, oh my god, we're putting on a lot of volume. They're we're kind of like not in a sense of like, hey, we have a low day, high day, low day, but like in that 3-day period, say 4-day period, whatever it is, like there's a lot of workload that goes on. But like at the same time, like I've started to believe this, like at the higher level, it's not always going to be less and less about their outputs are so high you have to kind of baby the athlete of like their outputs are super high, like you kind of have to work sometimes in like what got them there, and you have to train those guys because they might be a little bit, or they might be a little bit more resilient to to high volume. They might need additional stress versus like just a different method. And that's what Kel had talked to me about this when he was bringing up some of his baseball guys, where it's like, a lot of like one of his best pitchers right now. Guy can throw 95, has touched 98, 99 every once in a while, and it's like he does better when he gets a higher strain on him, and he can respond, and you kind of get that undulation or back off from it. But if he kind of tested it in some off-season stuff in kind of fall ball, where he kind of like catered and really baited him because he had a lot of pitching days, and he's like he responds way better just from every once in a while we're gonna every couple of days we're gonna touch something heavy and we're gonna make him go fast for a longer distance. And then he comes back, he recovers, and he's throwing heat, and he's pinpoint accuracy. His spin on the ball is great. Like higher level athletes need to be treated as such in the sense of like they are pretty physical specimens. You got to like push in order to push the needle on someone like that. You probably have to apply more stress.
Yeah, 100%. So it's like the things like it's always like surfing the edges, and it's like sometimes we've gotten to. I mean, it's like another rant for another day, but like at times from an SSC standpoint, I feel like, and me and like because my mentor and best friends like Ray that we were married, like says all the time, like people become so like, and maybe it's like an idea of like an over medicalized approach and model, but like people are so afraid that someone's going to get hurt, and that's like you've made actually make people more and more fragile. The training's like, hey man, like you have to surf the blade a little bit, like you need to like, and also I have a realistic approach. The thought of like there are some people who just like probably maybe aren't gonna make it. Yeah. Like, well, they're gonna struggle a bit more. It's like because if you have 120 dudes on a roster and all 120 make it, you probably didn't train hard enough. Mm-hmm. like some people, like if you're 100% healthy the entire time, like you probably didn't push the limit enough. Like because Johnny walk on, who's like bad genetics. That will maybe like kind of works kind of hard, but not crazy hard. Like if he doesn't get a little broke off every now and then, but like it's too easy. If he's fully surviving every single time, like unless he's just some like freak of nature, like from a capacity standpoint, if like they're not hitting a week. If you got an 8-week block of training, then I get to week 7, 8, and they're like, coach, and really most of the guys on the team like, I feel like shit. It's like, all right, it's good. Because you're supposed to feel like shit at this point.
Yeah.
If you didn't, if everyone felt great, we're not pushing hard enough. Like,
it's like getting to the point of like so much, and it's such a detail oriented plan that you know that in like say in 2 weeks, walking into those practices or those training sessions, you're like, yeah, we're biting our nails a little bit right now to make sure that some people make it through, but it's planned in that aspect. Like you're not just throwing copious amounts of volume and high speed distance at people, but you're like, this is our make or break week where like. If we're going to see somebody go down, like with like say a soft tissue or even just like lethargy, like this is where it's going to happen. If we can make it through this, then like we've done everything we could, and we adjusted to make sure that like someone might get broke.
yeah. Like even like now, so we just finished our winter block of training, and like we were lucky. We did it's just 9 weeks straight. We don't start spring ball until after spring break, so it was just 9 weeks straight of training. And we got to like week 8, it was like you could see on dude's face, like in the warm up, like hey, these dudes are cooked. And we're like, hey, we just gotta survive this week. We adjust week 9 a little bit, but they got a whole week off of spring break. They'll be all right. Got the Friday looked like fucking zombie land. Like, dude, absolutely smoked. But like we told the dudes like, man, I feel like shit. I'm like, how'd you sleep, man? They're like, oh, I was sleeping terrible the last 2-3 days. Like. I feel like crap. I'm like, it's good. You're supposed to. Like, this is what like acute overtraining feels like.
We're gonna super compensate after this. You guys are gonna get that little back off in week 9. You're gonna go on spring break, spring ball. You'll probably be chomping at the bit to put a helmet on. You'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly. So I think some of that's been like a little bit, and maybe it's because of like, maybe it's a case of we over monitor. In a lot of cases, like now, because everyone has force plates, everyone has this, everyone's taking, everyone's like so worried about, guys will be fresh. It's like, dude, if you're fresh all year, you're detraining.
Yeah,
you can't feel good all year. Like sometimes you should wake up and like, man, I feel like garbage. But guess what? The worst gotta get done.
Dude, I love that. French, I know you had a couple. I know like on our list, like there's some stuff that I know you want to ask.
Yeah, sorry. I know you've been dropping some heat, but to backtrack just a little bit, we talked about how you've worked in all these different types of sports, and I feel like it's kind of a stereotype that if you want to work in football, you've got to only do football. And you kind of look at your career and you're like, that's kind of bullshit. Like this guy's worked at high levels in pretty much everything. How did you, especially with when it first started off, you said you couldn't get a job to save your life. How did you traverse like jumping from pro baseball in a rehab setting to training UFC to training D1 college basketball? Is it more about just like knowing more principles based, or because a lot of people will say like, oh, you're not a basketball guy, how are you going to get a basketball job, etc. How did you navigate that? Because I feel like there's a lot of people who may want to get into a different sport, but they kind of have a sunk cost fallacy of, oh, I've been doing this for so long, I'm kind of pigeonholed.
Yeah. I'll say, I mean, a big part of it, like, is definitely like like network too. Like, got friends and buddies across like multiple sports. That's always super helpful because they're like more connected to a certain sport than like I am. Will be so. I think that's a huge part of it. And then from the training side, um, it's two things. I think it's for sure principles based first, which I think at times has been like the law is being lost within our field of like it's always joked. I'm always joked like our education comes from like podcasts and like Twitter, Instagram posts. Like you're fucked up. like you should be like read a fucking book and stop just buying books and post on Instagram. But like so they having like true principles of like training um is like foundational, and then like being like a whatever sport you're going into is being like a nerd in that sport. So that way you can speak the language, not just to the players, but then to the coaching staff as well, because that's how you gain their trust. Like the coaches don't feel like you understand their sport at all, because like it's not like a soccer guy, he didn't really play, but it's like if you can speak some more language, it's even stuff of just like literally calling things by the right name, like that like gains that trust super early on. Like okay, this dude actually does like care, or even asking questions, or who you should watch, who should study, or like watching games, like it's super valuable. When I was going to the Astros, like I literally illegally downloaded like 3 baseball games, like from YouTube onto my laptop to watch on the flight back to the U.S. because I hadn't watched a baseball game in years at that point. So I was like, baseball's fucking boring. So like, I had to make myself a baseball fan till so I could fully understand the true demands of the game. Other than like what a textbook tells me, I was like, okay, well, what do they talk? What's the game like? What do they talk about in the game? Like, what are some like things that are common trends I see? So I literally watched like 2 or 3 games on a plane, like because I was like, I need to be a nerd about this sport that I haven't played since I was a little kid. Well, like, I think I played baseball in like 7th grade. I was awful at fucking hitting. Like, so it's like that. So I think that's like a big part of it. It's like being able to like speak the coaches' languages up front, so then it helps them realize, oh, okay, this guy, even if he doesn't know the sport, didn't grow up around it, he does like care.
Yeah, that's good. Um, Building off that, is there like a specific skill that you could pinpoint that's been like most critical for you so far? And on top of that, how have you seen the field change since you've been in it? And what do you think like the next big skill that's going to set coaches apart will be in like the next 5, 10 years? Because this thing's moving fast, especially with the sports science stuff getting more popular, whether you like it or not.
I'm trying to think. Skill has been most helpful. Um, it's probably no like hard skill really. I'd say because like anything can be learned. Stuff like whether it be Excel, whether it be learning text, what that like most of it can be learned in like a shortish amount of time, relatively depending on what it is. It's probably more like the soft skill being like open minded and asking questions first, and like being okay with not being the smartest person in the room, like and being asked questions and ask uncomfortable questions too of like coaches and like coaching staffs and being like, hey, like what's been the biggest thing that's hindered you from like success? But being able to ask questions where you don't come off like a dickhead. Like we just ask people, hey, like what's the area of growth you feel like you guys need as a program? What's like something that you feel like could have been better that you've seen in your last 2 years here, 3 years here, whatever, from a coaching side, whether it be directly to S&C or not, it could just be like organizational structure wise, and you gotta get an idea of what some of the underlying issues may be at a place, or what they feel like they can, or what lens they view things from too as well. So maybe it's like that side probably the most important skill, especially because I've worked in so many sports. Like, is it being to be open minded and ask like kind of the right questions a little bit. And then field evolved. I don't know. I sometimes wonder if the field's progressing or regressing. I'm not really sure at times, but like I think trying to think of what's the. I mean, fuck. There's no like political nice way for me to say it.
Say it.
So,
Don't hold back, dog.
So a couple things. There's like a couple. Like, one is like, oh, I said this on another podcast too. Is like tech companies and people who work for tech companies. Like, well, like that is not just like some of them are mad cool. Like there are dudes at Catapult I'm cool with. Like we grab a drink together, hang out, whatever. But like the bulk of people at tech companies stuff, like they aren't your friends, bro. Like it's just like he's a salesman or she's a salesman. Like, it's literally their job for them to make you feel like they care that much about your career. Like it's like because the moment as someone who's been fired before, like once you're not working anymore, their phone stops ringing, bro. Like, they stop texting you, like they know, like so that's one piece. It's like, hey, like, dude, like these tech companies, they care. They want to make sales. They want to be able to post like they're at such and such schools, stuff like that, like all the time, because like it helps them from a marketing side, which is fine. Like it's a transactional, it's a business, like both ends. So I think that's like a big part of like people like get so bought into like buying tech because like, oh, I like this guy, this tech company or whatever. Oh, such and such school has it. Well, oh, we should. Oh, such and such has Hawkins. We should all get Hawkins. It's like, but your school already has Vol. Like you're essentially buying the same thing twice. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like I know they're gonna tell you it's way better, but that's just it's their job too.
Yeah.
Like that's really what they're supposed to do. But like unless you look at it and like understand it's like they're both pretty much the same thing. One just calls it metrics by a little bit different name because one owns the rights to the names and one doesn't. Like or even like Catapult, where it's like there are some companies that are garbage. Like Kennell is awful. Like Kennell, like some of those other companies are terrible. So like. But like, it's not Catapult. I had to tweet about it. It's not like Catapult, Stat Sports, or like player data. The rest of them are like they're just selling you lies. Like that's just what it is. But like that's their job to make sales. So that's okay. So like you have to be able to understand like that piece. I think is huge. I think another part I've seen it evolve with like I said earlier, like people don't. I don't feel like people really read to understand books anymore. Like everyone just looks at Instagram posts and like I joked that like. You always know what time of year it is, like at the SEC, because everyone's doing the same exact things. Like everyone's doing contrast, everyone's doing French contrast. Oh, like basketball season about to come up, every basketball stream goes doing French contrast. Oh, just shit, guys. It's like, works in hockey. Everyone works in hockey. All does triphasic training. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, which is fine. I don't necessarily right or wrong about either one of those. Or it's football. Everyone's doing Olympic lifts. Everyone's doing cleans. Everyone's testing this week. It's like what? It's like think as an individual person. Like think about actually what your team needs, like what the athletes you're in front of needs, not what like the Instagram coach says you need. Like not everyone. I got a tweet about fucking yesterday. Started like a war for fucking diesel training, like diesel training, breaking strength, dude. It's like dude, we're not skipping bounding. People not doing change direction beforehand, like overspeed eccentrics before up until like one paper by Damian Harper. Like I don't get it. So it's just like, bro, like people. I think so. People have to go back to like truly reading books and reading research instead of just looking at this guy at this school does it, this guy at that school does it, this guy at this pro team does it. And it's like, man, like they're just like selling a thing, and they might be copying somebody else. So like this is what they need for their group of athletes. Doesn't necessarily mean this is what your group needs. Like if you have So I say most of the time, like you don't need French contrast. Like most of the guys in most sports aren't strong enough, aren't well trained enough to need French contrast, and that's cool. Just do regular contrast work, dude. Like they don't need 6 exercises in a row and continue. Like they're probably not well trained enough. Like they're not all Werner Gunther. Like
yeah, the GOAT.
Yeah, like. That poor Werner Gunther video has been like edited down and so many times.
Now we're gonna
grainy. It gets grainier and grainier every time I see it.
We're just gonna see like a deep fried edit of it one time.
Yeah.
What do you?
It's just from like a pixelated video, like a playing Pong.
What do you think about like healthy level discourse in that aspect of like, and I think French, like you brought this up, like challenging your mentors. So like we almost like put them on like a pedestal, right? To where like they helped you like formulate so much of your thought, helped build you up to like the coach that you're gonna be. Like, what do you think about the idea of like find the blemishes in them and like challenge them with like a healthy level of discourse to like not like necessarily just be argumentative for the sake of being argumentative, but like see what their flaws are and see what they think of like that. Like I feel like that's a point at like a mentor-mentee relationship where when you feel like you can challenge them, they start to get the reciprocation of everything that they've poured into you to make you into a good coach or a good individual. Like what's your opinion on that?
Oh, I 100% agree. Like, if you believe everything someone says, you don't have a thought process. You have a cult. Like you have like you have a cult. You don't have a thought process. You have a belief system. So like if you fully believe everything like your mentor says, does, has done, how they train. You believe everything that people who they consider their mentors. Like man, like you don't actually have your own individual thought. You just have regurgitation of what they say and what the person they learn from says. And then you see it in like some of their programming too. Like Kira's one of my best friends at Kira's wedding. I'll let Kira watch my kids anytime. Like, Kira's one of my best friends in the world. Kira and I don't agree on everything when it comes to the training. Like because we shouldn't. Like you should like it'd be weird. It'd be more weird if you like did. Especially at this point, because at some point you should have some level of like disagreement. And I think some of that like discourse within our profession has probably been lost a little bit. Where like everyone just agrees with each other all the time, and people put people on a pedestal based on like social media followers because they post regularly. And then you actually see it, but then you see what they're actually doing. Like man, like in the nicest way possible, this is not good. Like it's like just because you have 30,000 followers on Twitter doesn't mean this is good.
Yeah, it's like this is great for clicks versus this is great training, and you're just showing our great training. You're putting the program together to show other coaches on Instagram to get them to watch what you do versus like
and then, like you're selling something on the back end. It's just like, but no one's ever like, but if you ever disagree like publicly, like which is like, hey, I'm very much for the idea of like if you post it publicly, it can be disagreed with publicly, like because that's the nature of what this is, like what social media is and what it should be. But like if you disagree with it publicly, like you're an asshole. Like you're the piece of shit. It's like, no, bro. It's like I'm not trying to be a dick. Like I'm genuinely trying to understand. Or like, hey, like I think this is wrong. Maybe you should think of it this way. Like there's a way to go about it. Where like you're not trying to be a deliberate dickhead. Like for sure. Like, no, they're wrong. Some people don't. Some people like, remember, regardless of how you go about it, they're always gonna get offended by it, which is fine too. Like teach their own. But I think some of that like discourse or disagreement, or whatever, has been lost in some ways, like publicly. But you also see it in conferences. Like people host conferences, so with that, and like every conference is kind of the same. A lot of people talk about all the same things. No one ever just like, hey, this is how we train. It's like the results we've gotten. This is an example of like this is an example of our program. Like this is what we do. This is what we want. This is how we periodize stuff. Like everything's like, oh, this is our force plate jumps. This is our force plate like presentation. This is our I don't even know the big one I've seen recently. Oh, like game demand. This is our game demand presentation. It's like, man, I can read an article about sport.
That or the idea, like, what was it, like 2 years ago? I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. Everyone loved like accentuated eccentrics. That was like the thing at like 4 back-to-back conferences, and it would be like 2 speakers at every conference. And I'm like, all right, so we overload the eccentric, and they probably get a little stronger. Like, what's next?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, what a groundbreaking thought concept.
Yeah, we apply stress, and then the stress works.
Yeah, so you don't see a lot of the same things all the time. Like, so that's what I think is where I think as a professional maybe regressed, and maybe it's because of medicalized model. Maybe it's because everyone's so focused on like the technology side all the time, but like some of the true coaching training sides like being lost. You don't value training as much because it's much easier to jump people on force plates and say they got better, not realizing like, hey man, they get better at it or they get better at the test because you do it more.
Yeah, they probably got better at the skill.
Yeah, it's like, do you jump? Do you ever jump outside of this? No. Oh, okay, they probably just got better at jumping then.
So you're saying like the art of coaching is kind of getting lost versus behind the science.
Yeah. Some of it's not even real like true science. It's just more just like we have technology to measure things. But we don't actually know what we're trying to measure. We just bought all these things because everyone else has all these things.
The art is getting lost behind the money. Yeah, and we've talked.
So you see people get new jobs. People go to a new place, and the first thing they do is buy like, oh, I bought 1080. Oh, I bought 3 sets of force plates. Oh, but it's like, okay, what's your first month of a program look like with your whole new team which you don't know who you have?
I don't know yet, but we got this tech.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're gonna do so much, and then it sits in the closet for 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Like, go ahead, French. I'm gonna cough in the background.
okay. Yeah, I think the being able to like think critical is kind of getting lost, and like I think social media probably plays a little bit because, like you said, like people go to the big followings. Oh, like this guy's doing this must be right. Instead of they don't want to stand out by questioning someone who's quote unquote popular. And I think like we're also kind of afraid to admit that there's a lot of shit that we don't know, and like no one has it all figured out. But if I posture and act like I do and speak, convincingly, then it kind of people forget about that. So it's tough because I think if you don't post, I mean, it's like you don't exist. Like you want to post good stuff to help the field, but the people that are posting the most, maybe the people that are like hurting the field, quote unquote, the most. So it's a tough situation.
It's almost like some of the times, like you see someone who fires out, say, like 1 to 2 posts a day about training. It's like, who are you training? Because most people in the industry who, like we'll just use all three of us for example. Like TK, like how many training groups typically in a day are you having like in an off season, right? Probably 3 or 4.
Yeah.
French, you're in just cyclical, like smaller group sessions consistently. Like maybe you can grab 1 clip, maybe 2 from a session versus like me here. It's like I got essentially 4 teams that I'm training, across like track and field alone of like sprints, mid distance, sprints and jumps, mid distance, distance team, throwers, and then like working with football. It's like your day's full. Like, how are you getting so much time to do this? Or is that like, are you only training like a couple people and then now you have all these like free thoughts? But it's like, this was one of my arguments, like probably about like 1 or 2 years ago that I've really stuck into this of like, that's a great idea. How is that mass produced for when you have 80 athletes in the weight room? When you have 16 bands on one setup with this and this like mega complex and it's this or that, and it's like, great. That works great for one person in say like a private studio gym. How do I do that with 95 kids and just a barbell? Because not every school has all the technology or all the funds. Some people struggle to even just buy bands because of like budget cuts.
Yeah.
It's not a scalable option. You just have this like wacky idea, and I've seen Kier take shots at like David Weck or this or that, where like you start to see that like kind of same thought process of like, what are you doing? Like, what is it that you're training? What's the derived like adaptation that you seek? And like, how do you do that in the simplest fashion to move forward without getting super intricate to prove that like, it's like this, there's like an ego that comes into like the social media of, I need to be smart. I need everyone to know that I'm a genius because as soon as they know I'm a genius, they trust me. I can sell them something.
Yeah. It's that seeking that constant external validation, like that pat on the back, be like, oh, see, like I am good at my job. It's like, so man, like it's more than just social media likes and like people putting fire emojis on like under your posts.
Yeah. I think social media is like a good tool, and it help like you can use it almost like as a good resume, almost of like if a coach sees like a legitimate solid training thought process and like system approach, like it'll get there. And like we've done it at Elon to where we start to like use it to help build a brand, to bring in say interns and then teach them real training. But it's like have that separation of knowing it's just a tool. It's not like the end goal. And
exactly.
especially like a lot of younger coaches, like, I mean, we'll eventually have Alex on here, but like, he makes a joke all the time. He's like, here's another white boy with Canva. Like, of like, you're not really a coach. You're just someone who's trying to use like, you don't want to be a coach. You want everyone to know you're a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I literally had one. I've been into before. I was like, why do you have a coach on Instagram?
Yeah.
Because like coach was like a coach. I was like, well, you haven't actually had like a job before. Like you just been like an intern twice. Like, bro, you don't need a coach on Instagram. Like I have one Instagram. I'm like, and there's some like, most of my Instagram, most of the time, has nothing to do with coaching. Like,
Yeah.
most of it's just like fucking animal videos, fucking nature, like
His
memes,
story's like 50 like stories long and it has
yeah,
nothing to do with coaching.
zero SNC.
It's like thought process.
Edge Tyrone dancing videos.
Yeah.
Like,
You're having fun with it, which like
yeah, anime. I'm like, bro, I don't take it so seriously, dude. Like,
it's like
it's like people, tell us what's like an Instagram and Twitter. I'm like, if you want to learn things, don't go to my Instagram or Twitter because I'm not gonna provide you much of that at all. Every now and then, I'll be like on some like on some caffeinated or some like nicotine fueled like tweet storm at like 9 in the morning. I was like, but other than that, like most of the time, it's like once a week maybe. And other than that, I'm just like repost stuff I think is funny or cool. Like,
I will say though, like when you're in your firestorm, you're in your firestorm and you're putting out some, you're putting out some good stuff, but it's like what you're putting out is like really leading. So it's like it makes you not just like take whatever it is at face value and be like, oh, he's right, that's what it is. It's like, let me look into this a little bit more, at least like from that thought process. So like you start like there is like, hey, I'm gonna go research that a little bit, you know? Like I remember like one vividly that you had was it was like if you just touch like 1 or 2 reps in reserve every once in a while, it's simple enough that you'll probably get stronger. That led me down like a whole pathway of like, are we just overcomplicating like general strength work of like, hey, I just need you to like train hard a little bit today and we'll probably be in a good spot.
Yeah. Like I mean, like we said beginning, like the strength journalists, they're not powerlifters. Like, so like they get to this point, and a lot of times it had to be 90. It can be like what we even found like here. So we're like pretty conscious in how we trained. Like if we touch 80%, 80 to 82.5%, we don't have any like VBT. Like once every 3 to 4 weeks. By the time we get to the winter, most of them are within like 10% of what their summer match was, if not just as strong or stronger. Like, and so like man, like maybe this is we don't have to be so worried about like, and literally we'll touch it for like 2 singles, like in a month, and that'll be like it. And then we see the same thing about even like speed too, like because we hit that 9% like every Tuesday. And typically, like still guys who hit it on a Saturday also, whatever the game day that is. Like I had my intern do the numbers of the day, just on the offensive side, offense and defense, from camp to our bowl game on Christmas Eve. Like guys had over, it was like in the 800s of like 90% plus exposures in a 6 month span. So going from August 1st to December 24th. And it's like, man, then we came back, and I was like, we had about 2 weeks off, 2.5, got back in winter training. Then, like, normally we hit the ground running of like sprinting. Normally, like, out of fear, probably on my end, like, we kind of start a little slower. We'll start with like maybe like wicket runs, like more sled work. But that's what I was like, man, they had 14 days off. Like, they can still sprint. So, like, hit the ground running. We're sprinting from week one. Like, we're skipping the middle, man. Like, for our Devo guys, a little different, obviously. But, like, our regular offense defense groups, like, hey, we're hitting the ground running. Like, we're rolling from the start.
Sick. One other thing I wanted to ask is you talking about?
Go
like,
ahead. I was just coughing.
I
was just coughing. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. We mentioned your random Instagram stories. What are some? Because I feel like coaches get in the habit of like they're obviously we like to take the work serious, but can not have a life outside of it and have like no interest outside of like performance. So what are some of your things you like to get into outside of performance, and how do you think that fuels you as a coach / person?
So let's put them outside of obviously like my wife, my kids. Muay Thai, I love Muay Thai. A lot of people don't know like I've been riding a skateboard or a longboard since I was like 11 years old. So that's a big one I love to do. Like especially last night for being in Florida, I just like take my board out most times a year and like just skate around for 20, 30 minutes or whatever. Big into like love watching like anime. Big like history nerd too. Those are probably like my main like things I'm into outside of like just traditional like sport and like training and stuff like that. Trying to think. I'd say probably the biggest ones are like those things have given me the ability to do nothing, to not think about work, and like think about just like other things, be present, be in the moment. Like if I'm not present when I'm on board, I'm gonna like hit a pine cone and bust my ass. Like or if I'm not present at Muay Thai on sparring day, I'm gonna hit in the face. Like so I think that was probably a big part of it. That's why that be present and not think about work, and then it helps you to zoom out a little bit. Like I think, and I'm big into like I love like travel and show that too. Like I've like to like be like go to a ton of countries and stuff like that. That's the nice part being in baseball is like actually at the time we like the whole off season off to do whatever we want. We still got paid as long as we're still like coaching. As long as we're still programming our guys online and staying in contact with them. So I spent one off season like I just like traveled around Europe like literally with a backpack and like a penny board like and that was
That's
like
dope.
fucking sick. But so it's just stuff like that where I think it allows me to like take my mind away from training, away from S&C, away from like general like team sport and sport in general, and just be like, oh, I was thinking about other stuff. And it makes me more clear minded when I go back into like work mode. I guess I think anyway. I mean, I could be fucking way off, but
Typically what we'd love to ask this question to coaches that we have on, but it's like, what's your biggest gripe in the industry? Now, you've definitely like helped answer that already, like throughout the podcast. So I'm gonna flip the script a little bit. French had a golden one on our kind of meeting notes here, and it was like, what would be the biggest advice that you would give yourself? Say 15 years ago, kind of getting into this, and then what would be the advice that you would give to somebody who's trying to like follow the same path that you did?
if I said I was getting myself like a few years ago, would probably be slow down. You have longer than you think. So I think like I mean, a lot of ways, leaving. I obviously say the Astros was like a pivotal. Oh, turning point is the right word, but it's like a pivotal kind of point in like my career, like leaving, because it was probably a situation where I maybe should have stayed, and I've probably been able to like, if I had someone reel in my own personal ego, I think more at the time, I probably would have stayed for at least another year. But I also think I needed to leave to learn what I didn't know a little bit and be exposed to like more things. Go to a bunch of like, I mean, fuck, like after the Astros, like I was at a different place every like 10 to 13 months. So I think I needed some level of that exposure to like so many different environments, different issues and cultures and good and bad things in terms of like sport and S&C. So I think that's probably a big point. I'd probably like, tell myself then, be like, "Hey, man, like, slow down. You have longer than you think. Like, you don't need to be like, you don't need to be like ahead of a department at 20, 25. Like, we want the soccer. Like, you don't need to be ahead of the department at 25. Like, what's who's that's only for you. It's not like no one actually cares.
Yeah.
like, um, so I probably one, and then telling this to another young coach is probably what I've told like some of the interns, like our longest intern AJ here, who've had now for he's here. He's basically been intern basically almost as long as I've been here. But like, is man like constantly ask questions, like question everything, like think like truly develop your own thought process and think for yourself. Like so always read things outside of S&C, read things in S&C. So you truly learn to develop your own thought process and you don't pretend someone just like regurgitates what someone said on Twitter or someone said on Instagram or what like even what I say. I'll tell them like I've been wrong plenty of fucking times in my life. Like so you don't have to just say like because I say it's right now. Literally in a week I may say I was wrong. Like, I haven't looked back at it, but no, I was off here.
French, you got any more?
I feel like I can ask this to you because if you had like any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, any superpower.
I knew you were going for that one.
Yes, had to.
Because I love to travel. I think being able to move super fast, and I say move and not necessarily fly. Because just so you can fly, because what if you can fly but you fly the same speed you can run at? Like that would suck.
Yeah,
terrible.
like if you run a 7-minute mile, like congrats, you fly at a 7-minute mile pace.
Oh.
Well, honestly, be like by super speed, so I like go someplace. If I don't need a car, like
that would be sick. Or like just be able to like like you're so fast you run across water. Like you just go spend the day in like
Yeah.
Europe.
Yeah, or like teleport or some shit.
Yeah,
I like that.
hell yeah.
I like
Dude, that
that.
would be sick. That would essentially just free you up to do. You could live wherever, you could be wherever, you could do whatever.
Yeah, could you do that?
That'd be a sick one.
Brian,
Yeah,
what
man,
would yours be?
I think mine would be. I mean, it's so cliche, but I would say like super speed, probably. Like just
Yeah,
unreal.
Flash.
Like, but yeah, like Flash, like that. Like not only that, but I'd be Olympic champ. Live the
Facts.
dream.
Be the fastest white guy in history.
Fact.
Give me that, man.
Take that, Christophe Lemaitre.
French, what about you? I feel like yours would be like super strength, either that or teleportation. I know you don't like being in the same place for more than like a year or a day.
Yeah, the teleportation would be sick. Another thing, I think since I've been down here, like a sick one would just be you can understand any language and speak any language, like because then
That would be
because
cool.
like yeah, because like your experience anywhere would just be that much more elevated because you can just communicate better.
That's a good one.
That would be a cool one for me and just be like so. I feel like if we pair me and TK's together, or Brian's really, that'd be like the ultimate.
It'd be like the
traveler
ultimate travel
superpower.
group. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How's your coaching Spanish?
It's pretty good. I mean, well, relative to when I first got here. I mean, you got like you said, you got to learn the basics, and then like the first year was like just trying to like get by with what I could, and now this year I've been like actually making like we just did like player meetings with all our guys, and I'm like doing those in Spanish and
Oh, hell yeah.
having like a translator to help, but like it does make a big difference, especially because like you can just like mess around with the guys a little bit, like you get a little more buy-in that way. So it's definitely it's definitely interesting. So
But yeah, once you like coaching Spanish down, like the dudes they buy in so much more.
yeah,
I used to personally
100%.
feel like that. Like versus we had coaches across all sides who like didn't really like try to learn Spanish that much. Some didn't really learn at all. And it's like, bro, like we got
Dude, you just gotta try. Like even if you have
like a DR, Cuba, like bro, like even sound like an idiot, like they'll appreciate you giving an effort.
100%, yeah. Even if your Spanish is like pretty shitty, like they're like, okay, this guy like wants to try. So
Yeah.
100%.
At first, it's just like levántate, por favor, levántate.
Yeah.
Every greens is Kennell, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. What's up, man?
All right, French. Should we let's get a review and then we can close this thing out.
Yeah, let's wrap this bad boy up.
TK, if you can, I'll go first. I'll give you kind of an idea of how we do this. I want you to rate your Red Bull versus your Celsius. I have 3 sips out of the Celsius. It tastes like rotten strawberries, 200 milligrams of caffeine. Can is pretty ugly in the sense of like, looks like it's straight out of like a 2000s like midnight buy now and get a second can free ad. And $3.49 a can. I'm going probably 3.1 on the Celsius strawberry passion fruit. Tough look for the boys.
That's big yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go for it.
I don't know if I'm gonna.
All right.
Yeah, you hit it.
All right. So for my Celsius, I can't even have a flavor I had now. Celsius. I'll probably give it a 5 out of 10. Like it'll get the job done. You're not necessarily happy about it, but you're like, you know what? I'm here for the fuel. I'm here for a long time, not a good time. That's what it is. That's what I see. You get 200 milligrams of caffeine, and you're just like, all right, like this is gonna taste very average, but like it won't make me throw up. And then the Red Bull, the Spring Edition, like the Red Bull flavors are fire. Personally, maybe I'm biased too because I have a friend whose dad worked at Red Bull, and we were like in high school. He worked at Red Bull when he first came out with like other flavors, and so I got him. So we were to try them like mad early. So probably nostalgia feeling with Red Bull. So any Red Bull flavor, I'm basically all in on. Now, my only gripe for Red Bull has always ever been like, come on, 80 milligrams, like come on, 14, like come on, help me out. Like it's like I'm trying to feel something here. Give me at least 120, or give. But the flavor wise, give me an 8 out of 10 on the spring edition of Red Bull, the grapefruit and blossom or something like that. I don't know, but as a purple can, that was fucking good.
Love it, dude.
Hell yeah.
Guy might be listening to the podcast a little bit.
Yeah, we're catching on slowly. Hell yeah.
We're up to 3 listeners.
Yes.
French, you want to review your coffee?
Yeah. So if you haven't had like Dominican coffee, I think that's actually where Starbucks gets a lot of their beans from. It's actually like very like I think the DR is known for coffee. That and like Colombia. Um, really good. My roommate makes it every Sunday, so definitely can't complain about that. Nice gesture. The cinnamon adds a nice little spice to it, and I know it's like made probably like 30 minutes away in the capital. I think the factory's in the capital, so I give it a I'm not like a huge coffee guy either, so I give it like a 8.5 for coffee. And it's like, you know, you if you're not drinking DR coffee, you got to educate yourself, man.
Love that. That's big time. TK, take a moment. It's been great to have you on, but take a moment, tell everybody, like, shout out whatever you want to do, where they can find you. Take a couple minutes, man. Take your time.
I'll say, I mean, like I said earlier, if you like truly want to like find a place where you can like learn things and like be like, oh, I'd learn a lot from this guy's Twitter, Instagram posts. Like, do not follow me at all, because you are not getting most of that from me. It comes to, like SEC, like maybe you learn something from like, I share some random news thing or some random like nature or like philosophy posts or whatever, or like some like street art or some shit. But like, don't feel like you gotta follow me if you want to learn like SEC. Like, I'm not posting like graphs every day, like or like a bunch of training videos every day or shit like that. That's just not who I am. Twitter is TK Fitz Prep. I've had Twitter for so long. I refuse to call it anything else because I've had it since like 2010. So, and then Instagram is T Kennell Fitz Prep. There's like a little more training stuff like on the actual page, but I still don't post super often there. On Twitter, you may get every now and then like a rant of rant about something from me. Every now and then, it's like a couple tweet like thread, but other than that, those are like 2 places I which are the easiest. Like, I'm always down. I'm a pretty open person too. Like, so if you hit me up and want to like chat or whatever, or want to like talk about training, you want to fucking call me an asshole, whatever, I'll probably give you my number. I don't care. Like, you can do that. Like I'm very open. I try to be pretty easy to chill and talk to. Once I went down comes to training, like I love SNC. Like I love coaching, so I'm always down to talk training with like, pretty much anybody because it's always interesting to me. Whether you do it how I do or you do it differently, like I'm always down. Whatever.
Love that.
Pretty much it.
French, you want to close us out?
Yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. It's obviously another banger, as they always are when we have our guests. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at bevboys.tv. You can find my personal Instagram, French_fit40, and Brian at
B Shakuski, BSZUTKOWSKI. I'm sorry.
And yeah, so we'll be posting clips from the podcast on our Bev Boys TV as well as our personal accounts. Sometimes somewhat intelligent stuff on our personal accounts, maybe not. And yeah, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, tell a friend if you did enjoy the podcast, and we'll stay tuned for more episodes. Thank you guys for watching. Peace out.
Peace.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.